Welcome, guys. This is a pregame.com podcast and video for the 2010 NFL preseason. We're back after a summer hiatus, and we've got Marco D'Angelo with us, who is in the midst of one of the greatest, if not the greatest, win streaks in the history of sports betting, especially publicly available information. Marco, you've won 25 in a row right now.
As of the taping, we're going for 26 tonight.
And we did a little simple math, or not so simple. The odds of the streak that you're on is over 40 million to 1 at this point. I know you can't do that math, but you can know how important that or how big that is.
All I know is I've got a better chance of getting hit by lightning than this streak.
Or choking on like a rib. All right, now this is going to be one of the last videos you see with us doing the two-man stuff. We're going to be doing mostly three-man stuff, and we're going to have multiple cameras and a lot of better production coming up just within the next couple weeks. But we wanted to do a quick one for the preseason. So, Marco, when you bet, I actually believe the preseason is one of the best times to bet. I'll tell some of my theories, but again, 25-0, we got to start right here. What is it that you like about the preseason?
Well, the first thing that you got to remember is throw out stats. The way I handicap preseason.
So preseason stats or prior season stats?
Stats looking at strengths and weaknesses of teams, like yards per carry and stuff, because that kind of stuff doesn't matter in preseason because it's all going to be on who's on the field at a given time and what coaches' agendas are. I feel that my style of beating preseason, and I've been fortunate over the last 3 years. I'm very selective, but we're 19-9 the last 3 preseasons, 68%. I look at situations and look at what the coaches want to accomplish that week with that particular game. They have agendas, certain things they want to work on. They might make an emphasis more so this particular week than a given other week.
Okay, so one way that a lot of handicappers talk about is quarterback rotation. So in a way that speaks to the agenda, but not totally, because you might put your second string quarterback in early but keep your offensive line in for a long time. So where do you put the quarterback rotation in the mix? And other than that, how do you determine the agenda of the team?
One thing I'll say, starting and going back old school, and you make references to how long I've been doing this all the time. To handicap in today's market is so much easier because of the wealth of information that you can get just a couple mouse clicks away on the internet. You can go literally to any city's newspaper, read all the articles from the beat writers that cover the teams, and the coaches pretty much say what they're going to do for the preseason. This particular week, we're taping this after week 1 of the preseason. The Pittsburgh Steelers, for an example, they've got a unique situation this year because of Ben Roethlisberger's impending suspension. Coach Tomlin elected not to use him at all in the first preseason game because Byron Leftwich is so far behind the curve in camp so far. He didn't want to take any first-string snaps away from Byron Leftwich, to give Ben Roethlisberger snaps. And he didn't want to risk putting Ben out there with the second unit because you don't want to end up having an injury to your star.
Okay, so and we could dig into that Steelers situation, but let's try to keep it general. Is in that case what we're saying is the first string quarterback wasn't going to play because there was the second string quarterback who was going to have to be first string because of the suspension early in the actual regular season. He wanted to give some snaps to, which that makes the Steelers a weaker team than if Big Ben would have played a quarter or whatever. But that was publicly known, and clearly it was accounted for in the line. So what we always try to find out is what are the situations in which there's something the public might be misreading. So quarterback rotations, I think, in general are publicly known, and people know, hey, if Tom Brady's going to play one series, the Patriots aren't as good as if Tom Brady's going to play 3 quarters. But after that, when it comes to things like the offensive line, the defensive line, is that about reading the newspapers and getting a sense of how, because oftentimes the coaches will talk about, okay, the starter's going to play 4 series or whatever.
Coaches in all coaches, a lot of them have histories of what they like to do. Now, the Indianapolis Colts, we only have 1 year because they changed coaches last year. But it seems like they've kept the same persona where they don't care about preseason. First week of the preseason, they got drilled again. They get Peyton Manning in for his token appearance, get him out so he doesn't get hurt, and the reserves just can't generate offense. They've never cared when Tony Dungy was there. They didn't care about preseason. And it seems with the new regime, it's the same token. Now, there's other coaches.
All right, so you make a good point, though. Profiling coaches, not profiling teams, because when there is now in this case, maybe the perspective or the approach stayed the same, but that's not always going to be the case. It would seem clear that a coach like Ryan with the Jets is got in that Bill Parcells mode, and he was back in the day when I was in the late 80s and just getting into the handicapping. Is Parcells was renowned to win in the preseason, and I think that his teams, even as he's been in the GM role, have followed through with that, and it's just a mentality we want to win every game. So coach profiling is very interesting. Now, are there other coaches that jump out at you?
Yeah, there's definitely one, and he blew the doors off his opponent in week 1, and that's Mike Shanahan. Mike Shanahan, when he was at Denver, he played to win. I mean, Mike Shanahan is a control freak. We know that. He's a very egotistical coach. We go back to the deal with Al Davis and the feud with him, with his contract when he left the Raiders and such, and how he carried that grudge for so long against the Raiders. He took over the Washington Redskins, a program, Shanahan was out of the league for a year, come back. And to me, when I looked at that game and watched the film, this guy made a statement. He wanted people to know there's a new sheriff in town in Washington, and they came to play. They put up 42 points in that game, and I think that...
Okay, so what you're saying, though, is that you are more interested in looking at Denver's results prior to last year to predict Washington rather than Washington's last year.
Absolutely.
All right, so that's a great takeaway. Profile the coaches. And again, I think that even goes further than the starter quarterback rotation or even the starter rotation, because even if you had the starters in even for a quarter or two, but if there's a mentality of we don't really care if we win or lose, let's try certain plays that we might not play during the regular season, you can read the papers and know how long the starter is going to be in. Most people are going to know that. But if you understand what the coach's mentality is, how intense is he going to be about winning, that can even be more important than a second stringer trying hard is better than a first stringer not trying hard.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you another team that I think there's going to be value with early on in this season, and I think you're going to see it in the preseason as well. I talked about this on Dan and Mike's podcast, the Oakland Raiders. This is a team that the franchise hasn't won for a while now. They have an owner that, is hell-bent on winning. I mean, Al Davis, commitment to excellence, and they went out and got a new quarterback. They traded for Jason Campbell. This is going to be a guy that's going to be the face of the Raiders. Do I think he's a first-string quarterback that's going to carry a franchise? That's going to be seen. But having the change of scenery from Washington...
And he's going to want to prove himself.
He's going to want to prove himself, and they're going to make a commitment to get this guy ready for the regular season because he has to learn a whole new system. So I think you're going to get more of an emphasis of trying to win in the preseason, instill confidence, and you're going to know that when he's on the field, they're going to have all of the best players surrounding him to get him confidence and not to risk injury. So I think there's value in the Raiders.
Now, I think you make a good point. Another concept is, even though a lot of this stuff is publicly available, the fact of the Colts being a team, and now even with the new coach having a coach that doesn't care about preseason, the fact that maybe Peyton Manning's only going to make a token appearance, the line adjusts for sure. I mean, the Colts might be -8 against Houston in the regular season, but they're not going to be -8 in the preseason. But there's still that perception, hey, it's the Colts. Hey, it's fill in your team that's a really good team. And I think, though, the line is adjusted, there's always that square action that doesn't really dig that deep, and they're saying, I'm getting the Colts +4, and really they maybe should be +7. So I think if you can find a public marquee team or teams that has a coach that isn't focused on winning, you in general are going to be getting a couple points every preseason game. Is that how you see it?
Absolutely, that's a good point. And in moving further into the preseason, when you get to like weeks 3 and 4, first off, week 3 is the truest week to handicap.
That's a good point. Week 3 is going to be, most teams play almost as if it's a regular game.
Dress rehearsal.
A dress rehearsal. Thus, it's more about how good is this team really coming in the season. And ironically, week 4 is probably the least. Week 4 is all about, all right, who's the guys on the margin, and let's play them as much as possible to see who we're going to cut and who we're going to keep. So in a way, week 3, like we said, most like the regular season, week 4 is going to be most about how well does this team draft? How well is that 40th, 41st, 42nd guy? So you're usually going to have the teams drafting earlier that were worse last year are going to have the deeper teams, and so that idea of bucking or going against the marquee team is even more in the 4th week.
It is, and another factor to look for in that 4th week, even though it's preseason, if you have a team entering that 4th week that hasn't won a preseason game yet, nobody wants to enter the regular season with an offer. It's not good for morale, especially if you're a bad team.
Or if you got if it's a team like the Jets, like you got to look for the Jets to play really hard. They just got beat last night. You got to look for the Jets to play harder than maybe they would typically, because they don't want their fan base to see 2 straight bad performances.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like a zigzag in the preseason, but the zigzag gets extremely strong if the team's 0-3 going into the 4th game.
Absolutely. And another thing that you can look at, and I'll cite an example from week 1. Actually, it was week 1A. If you looked at the Hall of Fame game, Cincinnati looked pitiful on offense. So you knew come out in the next week, the coaching staff was going to work hard on that offense. They put up 33 points. You don't always have to be looking at the point spread winner. You can find tails with the totals. If a team got scorched for points, you know they're going to work hard on defense that following week because you don't want to look bad 2 weeks in a row. So we can look at those things.
This streak's got your analysis on, I think. Now, next time that we actually have the multiple cameras and everything, we might be able to do a zoom to Marco's shoes. Now, I don't know what kind of view you have right now, but if you could get a close-up on these shoes, it would be it would start a conversation in the forums, I think, for sure. We got 1 minute, last point. Here's why the preseason's so easy to beat. The books take much lower limits. They're scared. The books are much more inclined to move a line. You'll see a 4 or 5 point line move. Low limits, big line moves mean the books do not trust their numbers, which means the bettors have an edge, and that's when we want to take advantage. Not necessarily when everyone else is betting, but when the books are the most scared is when we want to get the most greedy. All right, good stuff. Thanks, Marco. Now, we're going to be back soon enough at pregame.tv with all kind of new video stuff. It's going to all free, and it's going to be really worth watching. And remember, you also can check out our podcasts, which are audio only, at iTunes. Just go to iTunes and search for pregame.com.